So without further ado, let's get Comcast up here. We're going to be talking about how do we do innovation anyway. And joining us is Lysa Dahlin, SVP of Human Resources and Organizational Effectiveness, and Charlotte Field, SVP of National Engineering Strategic Initiatives, both at Comcast Cable. Thank you.
We like that. Wow, are those our Comcast girls going woo, woo? All right, so before we start, I hope you will indulge me for 1 minute. I have a 17-year-old who's a tweeter, so if you go on to the WITI Summit page, you're gonna see a whole bunch of young girls tweeting about our summit, and that's my daughter. So she had asked me before I left yesterday, Mom, what's it like to go and talk to all those people? And I said, well, you can stand up there with me and I shall take a picture. So if you could all wave to Hannah, I'm gonna take a picture that's gonna be tweeted
around the world.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, hashtag WITI Summit, I'll do that, but I gotta wait till I'm done here first because I kind of have some responsibility for lunch. So thank you for having us. We're really happy to sponsor this lunch. And Comcast is thrilled to be here. Last year we were here as well. It was our first year officially sponsoring, and we love it here. We love the women, we love the energy, and it's just so much fun to get to meet people. So thank you for having us back. It is lunch after all, so we thought we would be kind of casual. And what that means is Charlotte and I are going to have a conversation and let hundreds of our close personal friends watch. Before we get started, we'll each tell you a little bit about ourselves, but we would really like to keep it casual. So if you guys have questions or things you want to talk about or things that we bring up, I mean, we're not experts. We're not experts on innovation. We're not experts on career or job satisfaction, but we're hopefully going to be talking about a lot of that stuff today. So, if we talk about something that you want to hear more about, just put your hand up and feel free to ask. You're not interrupting us at all in the middle of the presentation. So, Charlotte and I have had the opportunity to work together probably for the last seven and a half years. You might not know this, it's my 15-year anniversary with Comcast.
Congratulations.
Charlotte celebrated 35 years last year. She must have started when she was like 12 or something. But our business is one that has merged and acquired over the years, so lots of us are from different companies that have ended up at Comcast. So I'll ask Charlotte to just start and talk a little bit about her background and who she is.
So first of all, thanks everybody for listening today, and I hope it looks like a really good lunch, so we'll have it later, so don't worry about us. But I basically have an electrical engineering, basically bachelor's and master's in business from Farley Dickinson University and Harvard. So I had a lot of opportunity to go to school, but I started my career working for AT&T, working on video technology actually with NBC, CBS, and ABC. Little do I know, I'd work for a company that actually owns NBC a few years later. Maybe more than a few years, but anyways, I did a lot of different things, and one of the things that I think we're going to talk a little bit about is really stretching yourself. But I worked in video transmission, I worked in fiber optic communications. I'm currently a member of the FCC Technical Advisory Council, which I find very interesting. For Comcast, I actually have done systems development, infrastructure and operations, and I also have had the opportunity to teach a couple of times in my life, which I really love as well. So as Lysa says, feel free to ask us anything you want. We'll tell you what our advice and counsel is, and we'd love to have a lot of interaction during this time frame.
Thanks. So I've been in HR pretty much my whole career. As I said, 15 years at Comcast supporting lots of different businesses, some of them that are customer facing, and then the last 8 years in the technology organization, which is engineering and technical operations. And I have to say the most fun I've ever had in my career is working with geeks. There is just nothing more satisfying than working with really smart people who love to solve problems. The bigger the better, and so that's really fun for an HR person. I went to BU, and as I said, I've been in HR my whole career, like literally was a recruiter outside of college. So what I do today really, I describe it as helping people recognize their potential. When I meet someone and talk with them about who they are and what they do, my orientation is really much more about what is their potential, what can they be? And so I listen for that, much more so than where are they today or where have they been. It's one of the things that I love about my job, because folks that do what you all do for a living are really ambitious about moving up and doing more and having bigger jobs and bigger problems to solve. So we're happy to talk about that today. So the topic we thought we would talk about, since you're talking about all kinds of sort of heavy, social media and technical topics, is to just talk about how do we do innovation anyway, and what does that really mean for us? The reality is, the drive for creativity and innovation collides with the reality of needing speed and not always having enough money to get things done. And so how do you do this kind of work and do it in a way that's satisfying and fulfilling over the longer term? And so, as you can tell, Charlotte's a little bit more of one of you, and I'm much more of a consultant to the business about how folks like you can be satisfied in your work. And so we'll talk about some of the softer stuff and some of the more harder stuff about the work that you do. So we thought we'd just ask each other questions. We're going to stand up, though, because when I was back there, it was really kind of hard to see the ladies that were sitting down here. So try to be as casual as we can as we're standing up. But Charlotte, maybe we could talk, I thought, about, to start, talking about that reality of, the need for creativity and innovation and the need for speed, and can you really have both?
Yeah, I think you can have both. I think what you have to do, though, is figure out what you want to accomplish and how quickly. And, if I recall, one of the projects when I first joined Comcast was to totally redo how we did provisioning. And provisioning means, how do you basically do all of the work associated with getting a customer up and working? And, people basically said, hey, there's a lot of tools out there, whatever. But the problem we had was the quality of the tools, the timeliness of the tools, and the cost of the tools. So, essentially, I worked with a team, and I essentially said, okay, let's change how we do provisioning. Let's change how we think about, and we were really focusing on telephone provisioning first. And people looked at me and said, people have been doing telephone provisioning for years and years and years. And I said, yes, but is it really accomplishing the light at hand? And one of the biggest compromises that I think I had to make was basically saying, this is what we're going to do, and then bound it, and basically say, and here's the time that it's actually going to take. And my team, who was very, very interested in being successful, also had a problem saying no. So when somebody would come in and say, well, can't we just add, this? And they go like, well, Charlotte, it really isn't that big a deal. And I go like, really? I mean, so, we had to keep our path very clear on what we wanted to accomplish and when we were going to deliver it. And then we also had to do something that, now people, basically use the term agile quite a bit. But we basically had daily conversations with the business. And we invited all aspects of the business, and it was every day at 4 o'clock Eastern time. And we basically showed them the progress and showed them the look and the feel of the systems that we were going to go do. And it was the first time people go like, well, I don't really want to involve those people. Really? They're going to be the people that are going to use it in the future. So, I said you need to be open. You need to make sure that you're not going to take anything, personally, like you weren't smart enough to develop something that met it. But, ultimately, when we showed the team and we made everybody accountable for the success, we actually delivered it with the creativity that we needed, with the quality that we needed, and we beat our time frame by 2 months, and we beat our budget by millions of dollars. So we all got to be heroes, at that end of that year. And the interesting thing is our leader at the time was a man named Steve Burke, who actually now is the head of NBC Universal. And when I went to do my budget presentation the following year, Steve said to me, well, we didn't want to tell you this, Charlotte, okay, because we want to, you're a new kid and all that kind of stuff. But after you left, we kind of said, if she does 50% of what she said she's going to do, and if she kind of meets the timeline, she'll be a hero, and her team will be a hero. And I said, well, I'm glad you didn't tell me that, because I probably wouldn't have worked people as hard as we did, or we wouldn't have all worked as hard as we did. But it was very rewarding for me to go back to my team and say, we totally, beat the expectations of the business, and we made things better. So.
So if you have to make a trade-off, if you can't do both, what are some of the sort of tips or things you think of to say, this is when you go for speed, and this is when you go for quality?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in the world that you really don't want to mess up, right? You really, if you think about, and I'll use the telephone analogy, 911, you don't really want to mess up 911. And so, if you want enhancements associated with something that could potentially impact it, you have to think about what the business consequence is. Everything that you do has a risk associated with it, and you just have to figure out, what risk am I willing to take? What risk is the business willing to take? And then I think, as Dr. Jane, Dr. Jane, I love that Dr. Jane stuff. I want to be a doctor too. But you have to think about, what am I willing to accept as the risk? And then you have to make it clear to the people around you about what the risk really is. So don't talk into the technology terms, which, oh, by the way, I can do it with the best. I mean, my middle name was TLA, three-letter acronym. I got that was my middle name for a long time as I started my career in industry.
True love always?
True love always, or three-letter acronym. I can name them all. Right? So, but that's what I'd say is, actually you have to assess the risk. And I think that gets into the kinds of characteristics that you need to look for in people. Is you need to look for people that are willing to take the risks, accept the risks, but also have that little gut feeling where they have to, constantly balance what the risk reward is. So, what about you, Lisa? When you think about looking for people that are joining our company or companies that you actually support, like NBC Universal, what do you kind of look for in those characteristics of individuals in the technology sector?
I look for people who are willing to be uncomfortable. So I don't do a ton of interviewing, but when I do interviewing for like executive positions and such, I ask people questions that I know are going to make them squirm, just to sort of see how they're going to react. Because the reality is, most of us are faced with things every day in our job. We don't really know what to do. We don't know what the right answer is. Hopefully we've got tools, we've got resources, we've got other people we can tap into. But the reality is, a lot of times we get something put on our plate and we really don't know what to do. And so how do you react in that space where you're uncomfortable? How do you do uncomfortable is something that is really important to me. Our boss, our EVP of technology for Comcast, is someone who likes to talk about change. We talk about, change is constant. It's just kind of been a buzz the way we talk about it. He talks about it in our organization as business as usual. So the reality is, we're in this new orientation where it's all about change. It's all changing every single day. And if you're in that space, and you're somebody who really likes to be comfortable, to know what your job description is, to know exactly what your team's doing this week, it's just not reality. It's not reality for us. And we're a pretty large company that in some ways we move pretty slowly. And still for us, that's not a reality. So I think that's one thing. I think the other is, that people that are willing and able to collaborate. We all get hired because we have expertise at what we do, but the reality of the people who are really effective are those people who can step up and show leadership, whether they're in a people leadership position, whether they're a product or a functional leadership position, or whether they're an individual contributor. I look for leadership skills, and so I ask about very specific questions about what people have done on projects and things like that in order to know, how effective they're going to be in our environment. And, we're not the first company to look at fit and culture and things like that when we hire somebody, but that stuff is really important, and for us it has to be. I'd say that's the biggest thing. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, and you have to really be willing to put yourself out there. We talk also a lot about risk-taking, and, in our world, you need to be willing to take risks and put yourself out there. But what that actually looks like for each person's different. What that looks like for me versus what that looks like for Charlotte may be very different. There may be someone who is really working on developing their collaboration skills, their communication skills, and so taking a risk for them might be standing up in a meeting and throwing an idea out there, where somebody like me, who's very extroverted, who'll give you my opinion anytime, all day, every day, taking a risk for me might be being quiet. It might be being silent through the whole meeting and asking a really smart question an hour in, instead of speaking up. So, showing up differently and taking risks, I think that's another thing that gets thrown around out there. And there's no one way that we can talk with everybody about, well, what does that look like and how do you take a risk? It really depends on you. You know what makes you uncomfortable. And if it makes you uncomfortable, chances are you should probably do it. Carolyn, did you have a question? Yeah.
What kind of questions do you determine how candidates handle?
So her question was, if that's the case, what kind of questions do we ask people, to know whether or not they have that orientation? I ask people what they're afraid of. We all are driven by fear in a lot of what we do. We're driven by, I always think, love and fear. So I ask people what they're afraid of, and it tells me multiple things. One is self-awareness. How aware are they of the things that really get under their skin? How willing are they and comfortable are they to talk about what they don't know and what they're not sure about? And then just, are they willing to go to that place to even admit that they're afraid? And not that I expect them to fall apart in an interview, but that they're willing to say, yeah, what really makes me nervous, what I really worry about is this. That's one thing that I ask, and you should see people squirm. You should see people squirm. But, sometimes I have to ask 2 or 3 follow-up questions to really get at it. But I usually get a sense for, is somebody able to get to that place? And if they are, then they'll be successful in our organization. If not, I wouldn't want to hire them and have them come in and not succeed at our company. I just wouldn't want to take that risk. It's not good for us. It's not good for them. I don't know. What do you think, Charlotte?
I actually agree. I believe that, I came into the business when you actually had people that were managing your career for you, companies that were managing your career. And because of that, I was always put into positions where I could continuously learn and be uncomfortable with doing something because I had somebody kind of managing my career. Now, probably in the last 15 years or so, it's all about me managing my career. It's about me making sure that I look for the opportunities to do something unique and different. And it might be a project, it might be something different. But just to give you a sense is, a long time ago, my boss's boss came to me, and I was a 24-year-old engineer, and they said, we need to come up with digital specifications for the FCC on how digital systems should perform, and we want you to do that. And I looked at him and I go I'm only out of school like a year and a half. I mean, you have engineers who've been doing this for their life. And he said, well, you're working on the new technology, which is fiber optic technology, by the way. And he said, and so you need to come up with the specifications. And one of the things I did as part of that is I had to basically say, shoot, I know I don't know, and so at least I'm consciously incompetent. I believe very strongly in the conscious-unconscious competency incompetent model, but I'm consciously incompetent, which means I can do something about it. I can actually learn, right? Versus if I'm unconsciously incompetent, I have no clue that I'm missing anything here, right? So I actually said, okay, what do I need to do to be successful? Well, I knew I couldn't rely on just Charlotte, because Charlotte doesn't know as much as Charlotte should know. And I reached out to a number of different people through my network of networks. And that's the second thing. It becomes really important to recognize I was feeling uncomfortable, and what did I need to do? I needed to deliver the outcome, which was to come up with the specifications to go to the FCC that got adopted, et cetera, et cetera. But I basically said, you know what, I'm going to go to some of the folks in Bell Labs, I'm going to go to some of the people in GTE, I'm going to go to some of the people in these other technologies. I'm going to ask them, I'm going to ask professors at schools, et cetera. And I developed a product, and oh, by the way, not only did I develop it and present it to the FCC, but I also said, you know what, this wasn't Charlotte. This was a whole team of people that all came together to say, what does it mean to have good transmission on a fiber optic system? So, one of the things that Lysa was talking about is that there's if you want certainty, go work at the 7-Eleven, right? I mean, you have to make money, right? You have to do transactions. And, some people are really, really happy on doing that. But if you actually want to be on the edge, like a lot of the women in this area are, or work for a company that basically transforms itself constantly, which is Comcast, you need to basically be uncomfortable to keep learning, to keep becoming a better person. And then the second thing is you need to make sure that you nurture your network. And you've heard that this morning in a number of different ways. And clearly, one of the things I did was read the biography of where WITI came from in Carolyn. And she said something that I found really impressive, which is, if you see somebody, bring them in the fold. And oh, by the way, don't stick around with just the people you know. Because then you all become doppelgangers. You all think the same way, you all act the same way, you all dress the same way. We don't want a doppelganger society. What we want is to make sure that we get all of the opinions of everybody together and make sure that we come up with the best product possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this morning was great because you're talking about innovation in lots of different ways. I love the panel that was talking about mentorship, and that led you down the path of angel investors and just topics that maybe you wouldn't think would go together. That was just a fascinating conversation amongst those young women this morning. My view of innovation, because I'm not a technology person, is it is ridiculously simple. It is ridiculously simple. I have a really big transformer toy in my office that's like really big and complicated, and I keep it on the table because whenever people come in and they sit down and they talk about what we're trying to do, usually it's something like restructuring a big function within the organization or looking at new leadership roles. I pull out, I call him Fred, the transformer guy, and say, look, it's not this. It's just ridiculously simple. For me, I had this experience recently, and I've been sharing this story a little bit because it seems no matter what I'm talking about or thinking about, there's some applicability. So ironically, I was eating a lunch with my best friend. We were in Mexico, and we were at like a restaurant, and we were sitting next to these two gentlemen, and we had finished up our lunch, which was a really great thing. I'll tell you why in a minute, because we actually observed this scene that I didn't realize how important it was until later. And so there are these two guys, and they're sitting there, and one orders a cheeseburger and one orders a club sandwich. And the waitress goes away and comes back, and she comes back and she puts down 2 cheeseburgers, one in front of each of them. And the guy who ordered the cheeseburger he was sitting like next to me, and he looks at his friend and he said, didn't you order a sandwich? And he said, yeah, I did. And he put his hand up like this to call the waitress over, and his friend said, no, don't do that. And he said, why? You should have what you ordered. You ordered a sandwich, you should have a sandwich. And he said, this cheeseburger looks delicious. And look at the fries that are with it, and it's cooked perfectly like I like it. I'm eating the cheeseburger. And so we just sort of shrugged and laughed and walked away. And I can't tell you how many times that has come back to me, and I think it has some applicability here. We also think that innovation has to be something hot and new and big and the latest thing, and it doesn't. Sometimes the cheeseburger shows up and you need to look at it differently. It's not what you expected, it's not what you thought, it's not what you wanted, but it's here. And it's really, really different than the way you were thinking. So it keeps showing up for me. And as I was telling Charlotte this morning, as we were even thinking about this, I'm like, this is the cheeseburger all over again. I heard something from our senior technology executive recently as well about innovation that stuck with me, which is, he said, everything new is not necessarily good. And everything old isn't necessarily bad. So you have to be careful that when we say that we're trying to innovate or be creative, that it doesn't necessarily mean we have to do something that's never been done before. So I'm really fascinated with flight, and I know I've read a lot about the Wright brothers. And the Wright brothers for years studied birds. And that's how they became innovators. That's how they created, that's how they were able to fly, is that they studied birds, which really is not all that innovative if you think about it. Right. They wanted to create a flying bird. So I think sometimes we get wrapped up in this, we've got to do something big that nobody's done before. And look, if you're in a product engineering position, that probably is your reality most days. But for most of us, it's really about looking at what we are doing differently, or taking an idea that maybe is past its prime and thinking, how do we rejigger that? How do we do something different here?
That's actually really good because I think that a lot of times we don't necessarily think about innovation as an old concept, okay? But think about, my dad worked for Bell Laboratories, and he had just gotten out of the Army. He was the first person in his family to finish grade school, first person to finish high school, first person to put himself through college, get his master's and PhD. And also, by the way, even though he was an engineer, decided he wanted to be a CPA and graduated #1, passing the CPA exam in Illinois, at the age of 57. What the heck, right? Just an interesting character. But one of the things that he did when his first day at Bell Labs, his boss came to him and said, I have this concept, okay? And he goes, okay, what's the concept? And he says, I want you to think about it, okay? What is it? I would like to send papers via the telephone lines. Something no longer needed, but it actually does exist upstairs. Fax machine, right? A fax machine. So my dad goes home to his wife, my mom, and says, holy crap, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. I have to come up with how you do this, right? But he kind of sat back and said, okay, well, I got to look at the problem differently. I can't look at it as it can't be. I got to look at it, what if? How could? And I got to just check again with a lot of different people and get some thoughts, et cetera, and be open to everything. Be open to everything. And so, that was my dad's story, but, it was interesting because I came out of the fiber optic industry. Anybody here know anything about fiber optics? Okay, we got a few, yay. Well, when you're locating a fiber cut, you use something called the optical time domain reflectometer, okay? And what it does is it basically allows you, it goes and puts a signal, and the signal flashes back, and it tells you the distance with the problem. Well, when I got to cable, one of the problems we had was there was no intelligence like that. And I mentioned to this guy, I said, Larry, Walcott, I said, Larry, why don't you think about, whether or not we can do something very similar but different in the cable business, okay? And he told me most recently, he said, I scared the crap out of him, but, he did design it. And not only did he design it, we implemented it. And not only did it get implemented, it actually gets integrated with Google Maps. And so guess what? Now the technician can basically say, I'm at Charlotte's house and she's experiencing problems, la da da da. I can actually see the break. I can actually know where it's actually occurring. I can zero in with a map. So I'm sending the person right to the locale. I showed one of the venture capitalists this at one of our meetings of the FCC TAC, and he's like, holy crap, he says, I see my house. I said, yeah, that's how it works, okay? We can actually see your house. He lives here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, I think, as Lysa says, innovation can be small, it can be big, but it's really about opening up your mind, not to think about why not, but what could. What could? And asking yourself, who can I test the ideas with? And I think all of us also need to be extremely open when somebody comes up with something, just like your children come up with something. You want to make sure that you're really open to thoughts. And don't let your limiters limit you. Open up your mind and think big.
One other thing I was thinking of as you were talking, Charlotte and I are fortunate to work on an executive team where there are 4 women. 4 out of 9 executives are women. And so we're in a space, question? Yeah. We're in a space where, we're fortunate to work with really talented women and really talented men. They were debating that up here earlier. What our team has, I think that's sort of special about it, is that almost every single person to a person is disruptive. So if we're in a space where we're talking about something and the team's spinning, somebody will stop and stand up and ask sort of the really tough, really disruptive question. It always gets us to a different place. I would say I had to see that modeled over and over and over before I was really comfortable with it. Charlotte has such a nice way about her. She can stand up and she goes, I was just thinking, where I stand up and I go, look. But you got to disrupt in your own way. But that was the other thing, that sometimes you just need to stop the flow of things. It's been done this way, and there's momentum. There's this flywheel that's turning, and it's just, especially in big companies like ours, it's just turning and turning, and you just have to do something to stop it. You have to, insert the stick in there so that it will stop, and then say, okay, how can we think about this differently? Somebody had a question, I think.
Innovative. Okay. Hi, thanks. I'm Ty from CBS Interactive. Hello, everyone. Can you give an example where the person was actually innovative, but for whatever resources, money, timing, like maybe they were the extreme? I mean, we talk about innovation, but sometimes the timing isn't right. How do you work with a person who has a great idea or has a lot of good ideas, but they can't be implemented right away? How do you make them happy? They're extremely innovative. What do you do there?
So I can actually talk about a real live example. There was a guy, when I was a little kid, okay, there was a guy who came up with this notion of video conferencing. Okay, anybody want to guess what year that was? Nope. Earlier than 74. 1960, it was shown at the World's Fair, okay? It was one of my neighbors, a guy named Mr. Shipman. I don't know what Mr. Shipman's first name was, but it was Mr. Shipman. And he came up with this wonderful idea, and guess what? It worked. But the problem is that the technology, even though he could make a technology work, the technology wasn't consumable, meaning it wasn't at the right price point, to make it universal. Now we kind of look at it and say, what the heck did we do without, the video capabilities that we have with our mobile phone, with our PCs, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? Sometimes, part of the challenge is to make sure that the person understands it's not a bad idea, but there's a number of things that have to happen for it to be a reality, right? And so what the folks at Bell Labs at the time realized is that this was a fantastic idea, but it was a time before its time. It came before its time. So they said, okay, we got this great guy, and he's working on these, unbelievable technologies, to, take a 90 megabit signal and make it, 15 megabits, which is, now it's like, less than 1 megabit. But, let's put them on something different. And they put them on, basically building an IP backbone, thinking about how to use internet protocol to actually allow things to happen. He never lost that idea, though, of wanting to have video technology at your hands. Now, he didn't really think about a mobile device. He was actually, at that point in time, thinking just about your telephone in your household. But I think you have to basically make sure that the person understands it's not a bad idea, but the timing, the money, et cetera, may not be good. Or what I've also seen companies do is say, it's a great idea, we'd like to support it, but there may be some other things that actually have to come before it. Is there some opportunities to team with other companies to actually bring it to fruition in a much speedier fashion? And so, Comcast works with a lot of different companies. A lot of companies here work with a lot of different companies. And that's where you have to actually think about not only success within your company, but how can you partner with others actually to make it a reality.
Well, and maybe let me give you a different context for the same question that's sort of people-focused. So, we have in our organization, we have 130,000 employees in our company. Most of them are people that are either technicians or customer service reps that go into someone's house, or warehouse people that manage. And so there are about 4,000 technologists, which is actually a relatively small number when you think about the size of the company. And so, but our population is different. So hiring them, retaining them, satisfying them, even the benefits package and the things that most people consider perks as compared to what our population might consider perks. So we've created almost a lab environment within our engineering organization. And it works both for things we're trying to do for employees, and it also works for projects and things like that. So sometimes I think we think someone's got a great idea, and they size it and they scope it, and it's $500,000. But if they had $25,000, there might be something that they could use just in a lab environment just to test out the thing that might get us to the next level to be able to prove out the ROI. So if I use an HR example, when I first started with this group that I'm a part of, we did not do performance management. 20% of our employees got a performance review, a written performance review. Of those small 20% that were getting a review, only about half of them actually had goals. So when I came into the role, we really had to think about it. My boss wanted to really drive pay for performance. He wanted to know, on a 4% merit budget every year, how can I really get my best people to be working at peak and really giving a lot of extra discretionary effort? And we weren't even really doing performance reviews. So I guess my long-winded answer on this again is sometimes it's really iterative over time, and you just got to keep at it. We went from 20% of the folks having performance reviews to everybody in the organization having goals and getting a written performance review within 2 years. Then we moved to the next phase, which is to create a bell curve of performance, which my people just hated. Because everybody was rated great, everybody was doing a great job, but in order to be able to give 8, 9, 10% merit increases on a 3 or 4% budget, some people have to get less. And that means we have to look at the people who aren't contributing as much and say, you're doing a good job. You're just not doing as good a job as you could be doing. You're not doing a great job, and if you can do a great job, and this is what it looks like, you can be earning these salary increases too. And they rebelled. Charlotte, remember, my peer group the first couple years said, okay, we've got this performance thing down. Can we drop the curve now? Can we stop forcing percentages of people into different performance ratings? And I said, no, because if we stop doing it, we're going to go right back to that vanilla place in the middle where everybody gets, roughly the same amount. So I'm really happy to say this is the first year. So I've been at this, 7 years of this iteration of wanting to implement a pay for performance culture. This is the first year that no one said, ugh, I hate this curve. Why can't we do it? People have bought into it because it's working. The people who are really contributing to the organization are making more money. They get a higher merit increase. They get a higher bonus. Anytime we have opportunity to give discretionary dollars, we now have created an organization that can reward that and can do it in a really consistent way. So sometimes it's like there's an idea and it's way over here. Sometimes it's too big. Sometimes it's too expensive. Sometimes it's too much of a departure. But I think, between, iterating and just this idea of also just making it smaller and creating more of a lab environment. And those are a couple things I think that we do, because the worst thing you can do is shut down somebody who's an innovative thinker, because you need them to keep being in that space. If they keep being shut down, just after a while they give up. So.
Yeah, and just to hit on the laboratory piece, one of the things that we did a couple of years ago is we tried to invent a project orientation with some of our folks to give them an opportunity to experiment where they didn't necessarily have experimental jobs. Like the people that are actually running our network, which is the largest IP network in the U.S. is, you kind of have the regular job. So we developed this, what we call it's called the CLEAR program, but what it is an engineering achievement and also mentorship program. So we take some of our senior engineers and we link them with some of our junior engineers, and they figure out what a project is that they want to go do, right? And we give them the opportunity to experiment, try, fail, try, do something. They get to network. They get to all of a sudden create a network, which, quite frankly, I think somebody was talking about, younger engineers earlier today. And one of the problems is that's not necessarily how we school, people in engineering or software development. We're kind of heads down. And so we give them an opportunity in that lab environment, not only to create, not only to sell, not only to network, but also pursue, IDDs and patents and things of that nature. So, and sometimes a project actually gets put up for a while and gets worked on a little bit until the technology catches up. And I always remember that Arno Penzias, who was the president of Bell Laboratories, but also a well-known scientist, always said, tell me the 90% of the ideas that are no good, and I'll throw them away. And that's our view of laboratories, is that there might be a lot of really good ideas, but then you have to figure out whether or not they fit in or not. But you can't cut down the 100% of the ideas, because 90% of them aren't really either ready for prime time or aren't going to work. To get the, you have to let things grow.
Other questions before we shift? So one of the other things we were talking about in our company that has been a reality that we've had to wrestle with is resilience. So we are constantly in transforming space. We're a company that, the cable company, which is 40, 50 years old, ultimately became an ISP when we launched our internet product, and then became a phone company, and we do home security, and we've got our hands in mobile and wireless and a little bit of everything. But the reality is we're always transforming ourselves. And that's exhausting, especially for people who, I was talking to somebody earlier about being, sort of an introvert and having to be in that space where you're always talking about, you're always in meetings and, trying to always be in that space where you're on and constantly talking about transformation and working on the latest 20-page PowerPoint deck. And, that's a real reality for us when you're in a transformational space. And so how do you get more resilient? How do you build resilience, both for yourself personally and in the organization? But I know I struggle with it. Maybe we could get a little personal and talk about, how do you, Charlotte, ensure that you have that ability to maintain your energy level and that keep yourself resilient?
Well, I think it's all about learning and exploring new ideas. But I think on the resilience part, part of it is you can't look about what's in the back. You have to look what's in front of you to go do, and you have to be very, very open to new ideas. And you were talking a little bit about the products that we offer. When I came in, one of the reasons that I ended up in cable, because I was with the other part of AT&T, the mothership. And somebody actually looked at my background and said, she built some of the largest network operations centers for the largest customers in the world, right? IBM, I saw IBM here, UPS, FedEx, all those guys, right? Chase Manhattan Bank, which no longer exists as it was, but somebody looked at what I had done in the past and they said, we really want to we think we're going to change, right? And we think we're going to, move in a different direction. And at the time, quite candidly, I was interviewed by now our CTO at Comcast, but he wasn't at Comcast at the time. And one of the biggest issues was she's a woman. not not because I was a woman, and not that he had anything against a woman, but he said, we don't have any women in, at that point in time, what was considered AT&T broadband. And you know, I basically looked at this as a huge challenge. I was going to go into a huge challenge into the cable industry where there were no women to speak of in technology, number one. Number two, I was going to do something that nobody actually thought could happen, that we could actually build a network operations center to look at cable, you know, in its entirety. And that was even before our backbone. We were actually buying backbone capacity from AT&T at the time. And I essentially said, okay, it's a huge challenge, and it's an unknown. You know, I was really fat, dumb, and happy in my position, and I was like, well, you know, I'm doing really good. You know, I got the Chairman's Award last year, and I said, I got to do something different to remain fresh, to move myself ahead, to have fun with what I'm doing. So I opened myself, I went in, you know, my boss said, you know, I got a $66 million budget, can you tell me if it's right or wrong? I said, I know it's wrong, I don't know what the right number is, but it's definitely wrong. Because I said, not $66 million to run this network, I mean, it's definitely off. But, you know, I had to change a lot of people's thoughts. I had to get them to think very, very differently, and I think that's what I like. I like helping people think differently, and I also like having people grow. I think one of the biggest things as a leader, and everybody is a leader, every person in this whole room is a leader, your children are leaders. I think one of the biggest things that you have an opportunity to do is help others learn. Help others basically get further ahead. And have them look back and say, see what we did. See what we did. So, you know, to me, that's what's really exciting. When I see someone who, I just was talking to a woman that's in my organization, and she just won a Women in Technology Award for the Mountain Division. And it was so absolutely cool for me to have this person be recognized. Now, one of the things is probably a couple years ago, nobody would have thought, you know, that there were going to be that many women from Comcast being recognized. And in the last 2 years, we've had 2 within my organization that have been recognized with that award. And so to me, that's absolutely fantastic. We have, you know, women that basically, one of our peers is basically working with cybersecurity and, you know, Washington. And I'm sure she goes through a lot of the things that Dr. Jane was talking about. Or there's only 3 women on the FCC Technical Advisory Council. It's myself, it's another woman from the cable industry who runs Bright House Networks, and then the third is an academic, okay? I think, you know, usually the FCC asks us to lead one of the teams, because I think it's a very unique skill set that we can bring to the table in leading groups and opening up the conversations and getting people's different perspectives out.
Okay. Was there a question, or you just have the mic? Was there a question over there? No. Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, there is. Hi. Okay.
The comment was that it would make sense that they would ask you to lead and serve in that capacity because women are facilitators.
Right. Good point. Good point. I was thinking as you were talking about this point for me, so talking about resilience, I was about 2 years into my job, in the job I'm in now, and I remember really feeling stressed that I wasn't feeling successful. I just didn't feel, so that performance management example I used earlier, I just felt like it was just baby steps on everything I was doing, and there was so much opportunity that I couldn't believe that I couldn't make more progress, and I was not feeling personally successful. And I had, luckily, a really good relationship with my boss, and I went to him and I said, you know what, I've given this 2 years, I don't think I'm your woman. You know, I don't think I'm right for this job. And he looked at me like, first he looked at me like I was first became the insanity look, then came the panic look. And he said, why do you feel that way? And I explained it to him. And so I guess my point is, you know, that having people that you know that you can go to, that you feel safe to go to, and to be able to talk openly about what's going on, and that you're stressed and you're tired. And I literally said to him, I'm tired. I don't think I can continue to do this job. And he said, maybe you can't continue to do the job the way you're doing the job. And let's talk about that. And I would say it was probably not more than 6 months where, my level of satisfaction, how I was approaching the job, the resources I was using, the people I was tapping into became very different. And today, I love this job. I won't let it go. Thank God it's growing. We had about 1,100 employees maybe when I started in the technology world. We've grown to 4,000. We have probably 2 times the amount of that in staff aug and vendors that help us and partners that help us. So, my job's grown, 6, 7, 8-fold, and I'm so grateful because I don't have to let go of it because it's just such an exciting place to work. But I think it's also, in order to continue to have the energy and the confidence and the comfort level to keep at it, you have to find those people that you can really be honest with and get in a room and shut the door. And, I know not everybody's as blessed as I am in being able to do that with their boss, but maybe it's a colleague, somebody at the next level. Sometimes it may be just somebody else in a completely different part of the organization, or as Charlotte pointed out with your network, somebody even outside of the company. But I think paying attention, and I hate to do this, I'm always really torn to talk about women and how we approach our jobs and the balance in our lives. But I meet so many women who think they have to do it all, they have to be perfect, they have to be great at everything. I've raised 2 girls, and worked really, really demanding jobs. The reality is I had to choose between being perfect and being happy. And once I realized that being happy didn't necessarily mean being perfect, I had to be able to, like I talked about earlier, face my fears and kind of know what I